And in the unconsciousness of spatio-temporal continuum, this is what we are now going to look at. I think the exposure to manifold, different types of projections and different types of space, a kind of visual heterotopia is evident already now when we look what is happening. Which then brings us to the fluid perspective as a fundamental epistemological challenge, I believe, when immersive virtual reality devices become massive and when much of what we do moves into virtual reality or is projected through virtual reality. We have been looking at the perspective, we have been looking at these images, and one of the distortions we were discussing was that the projection is on the circular surface, which then our minds in a way compress or straighten up, making the image movable, although it is extremely static in both cases, in vertical and horizontal way, which a speculation which has been done. Then using the one focus perspective and two focus perspective, but then further and further already the three focus perspective that comes up. But the perspective is there. We have, I just say some words about it. It is this Francesco di Giorgio Martini in Berlin, is this rather famous canvas. It is again this projection on circular surface of the screen, and then pushing it towards the edges. But what is fantastic about this building is that this space is infinite. It produces space that can continue until infinity, until you have the boats to drive it. And as a poetic image of infinity, it has left a strong impression on me. I'm going through quickly some of these images, not to stand too long here because the perspective we have gone through. Here is a interesting image. Of course, we leave aside that it comes on the screen through the computer and is out of pixels of light. But then we see that there is a surface, and on top of the surface, there is this image how to make perspective. And down here are the explanations. On the right-hand side, we see the section and plan that is used for producing the image that is on this drawing that is gradually already peeling off from the wall. And within that drawing, we again see the membrane, the projections, the eye. So in plan, section, and three-dimensional projection, the story is told us again and again. But perspective, since Renaissance, becomes really powerful tool. It allows to paint, draw, imagine spaces that are imaginable and fantastic, but at the same time, they go with the qualities of existing space. So the perspective projections becomes this intermediate mechanism or apparatus between existing and non-existing, past and future. And due to its abstract quality, it allows us the imagination to work both ways. And of course, then gradually it takes up more and more prophecies. This is the Cité Industrielle by Tony Garnier, and St. Elia, early ages of the First World War. All of these imaginations of future spaces are in perspective, until suddenly it is decided that perspective is not really the right tool for everything. So Theo van Doesburg suddenly comes back to this spatial image that doesn't have either perspectiva naturalis nor artificialis. And this is an interesting image from the viewpoint of meaning. Tree, 1916, already the Cubist experiments, and my imagination clearly tells me that these are buildings and houses up there. But I might be biased because of their education. But they are investigating how much can we distort the image, how much can we take away or add to get the essence of the poetic image out. And that is Malevich, 1912. Picasso comes quite later on top of these things. And then Braque, still life with metronome. Sometimes it's also called metronome and mandolina. So one can check whether we can recognize it. And I would say Braque is probably one of the first in a way to experiment and discuss how far can we go. What is, it is spatial, it has its content, it has its meaning. But how far can we go with it? And where should we go with it? So the one opportunity that was to step aside from this already 400 years old perspective drawing that to a certain extent had bored everybody out was to use other projections. And these other projections actually became, through mathematics, extremely valuable. Because if we use this type of axonometric, which is 30 degrees from the horizon, we actually can measure from these projections the real measures. This is the imaginary way of how we get to that type of projection if we make it spatial. And here it is said. It's mostly coming. This text is coming from the game spaces. Axonometric projections, no vanishing points. This allows you to scroll a large image below a viewport and to have the same perspective at any point. Lines that are parallel in the three-dimensional space remain parallel in the two-dimensional image or picture. If you know the scale of the axis, you can measure the size. And axonometric projections, therefore, for standardized for technical drawings. And here are some. This is the one I was talking, and the measures come there, 30, 30. 27, which allows us the easy computation between height and width. It is 1 to 2, whereas up there it's much more complex. You can't really compute it by heart every time. It's 1 divided by the square of 3. Then the so-called military projection, which is one of the very peculiar ones. When the first one allows you the edges to be in the right dimensions, then this one allows you the plans to be perfectly readable. So out of the plans, you just extrude out, and that brings up the projection that is so operational already, that can be or was used for a long time for military purposes. That's why it is called military projection. And then the Chinese perspective, which is also used for large picture planes, there the edge remains parallel to the horizon and 30 degrees, so it is distorted in a way when we start to think of it. And of course there can be other projections. There are fully families of projections. Here the lines with I correspond for measuring purposes, which in a way you need. I'm going a bit faster here. And the artists who were looking for different types of images, like Chirico or L. Lissitzky, of course made use of these ideas. L. Lissitzky, surely, I'm pretty sure it was the case that he took the icon painting, the space in icon painting that Florensky has been described. I think this is where he took his starting point. And the prawns, nevertheless, to their abstract expression, they were clearly icons. One could immediately feel how iconic these paintings were. And it has still been used until our own Thomas Rein, who produced this Nirvana complex in a very interesting way of fusing several images together, giving you both the spatial image of the world as well as sections, plans, and the general layout of the forms. So here and there it has been very efficiently used. Now, this paradox of the fluid perspective in Google Earth and other projection images was the one that we discussed. I'm not talking about the street views because they have become better, but the old ones are really fantastic, where the space moves whatever way you like it to move. But here is one that is my favorite. It is KTH in Stockholm. And I was looking at it because we had a seminar there. And suddenly I noticed that when I scrolled down, the building became much less. And then again, when I scrolled up, it became normal. But when I went up, it really became distorted. So what we are seeing is our mind and this cultural background tells us that we see an aerial photograph, but it is not aerial photograph. It is a complex, distorted image that dynamically moves when we move with it. So the old-fashioned orthogonal projection that comes to us since Renaissance, where we know exactly, as Alberti tells us, how to measure the angles and the lengths, does not hold anymore. So in this digital reality, space becomes this simulacrum of itself. It looks like a space, but it isn't there. Of course, we can add all the information about the traffic and everything, and then it distorts itself even more. And then when you need to find the way, your way is distorted as this image. What struck me, here's the one where you can see the fly-through or the street view. And the street view is quite cleverly done. Whenever you stop it, it stops with a full projection, with a full perspective. But in between, when you look at it, you can actually see that it consists of rather interesting planes of space. See the car slightly curved. The images of the trees are there, even better now. And all of that we do not really recognize, but they become part of our understanding, our unconscious. Because like Braque and other guys, Duisburg, we're looking how fragmented the image can be. This fragmentation of the image definitely becomes part of our spatial experience. But cleverly it stops where it should. Now here is another example which makes the story even more complicated. Because if we look at Umeå, we say, okay, that's the case. This is how the algorithms stitch the space together. But then here is Milan. And when I do the same thing, we can see the Milan Cathedral. We can see the perspective clearly going that way. So there is a third perspective to it. When it is in the central part of the image, it is the almost plan type, and the other buildings still have this type. And then when I move it there, it is right. So some of the images, some of the spaces, some of the projections have totally different build-up of projections. This is what I would call fluid perspective. What to do with it, I don't know, but it definitely has an influence to how we experience space through these projections and through the way we look at our current tools, our current digital tools. This is the peripheral viewing that was used as a simulation of image at the beginning of computer games, arcade computer games. And it is due to the different movement of the planes, which is a problem in virtual reality, because the parallax, as it is called, the different speed of moving at the edges of your viewing distance do not move as they move in natural circumstances, in the perspectiva naturalis. But there, this is much more, in a way, natural for the simulation of movement. One of the first computer games I've seen that had a specific taste of space was Max Payne. And anybody still remember this game? Okay, Antiquity. Of course, compared to current photorealistic computer games, it's nothing. But if I show you how the camera moves, you get the idea. So the camera is actually moving to a certain extent connected to the protagonist or the hero, but also not, which in a way allowed in that game, where I saw it firstly, where your hero was standing behind the corner, you as the player could peek behind the corner and see if there was someone there. And that was a very distinct way of using the space. So the camera angle could move, and that is where this current space of computer games really comes. This is, I think, the first time. So the camera moves and the protagonist remains in the same place, but you, in a way, take a kind of godly perspective. You can see the situation much more clearly and much more overwhelmingly than the hero you are playing with. It's also the case now in the computer games that this camera, there are several of these camera fixtures, but this one, and the hero is in front here, you can easily move through the fighting scene, fighting yourself with the controls, and appear on the other side of the hero. So around the hero becomes the personal space of the player, which is totally different from the previous cinematic or TV experiences. Because the hero becomes as if one of many elements of that space, and you, with your consciousness, actually withhold all of that space, moving in whatever direction you really need to see how the action goes on. Camera angles of computer games that in a way constitute how the space is built in our fantasy, if we go into the computer game. That is already something that foretells us what is going to happen in the virtual presence, where you actually are within the imagined space. And this is how you can actually change the perspective camera details, and it is not just the whole picture that you can distort, it is whatever you decide to distort, like the Umeå projection of the architecture school in north of Sweden, where the projection is false. So, and now comes also 360 film, which cannot be shown to you on the two-dimensional surface. But everybody of you can understand that where this picture ends here, it starts again there. And this projection on two-dimensional surface, like the maps of three-dimensional Earth, of course, is distorted in in a really fantastic way. But that doesn't. We can even look at these images, and we can even look at this cinematic, because our mind has the opportunity or possibility in a way to somehow reconciliate the totally contradictory parts of the image. But in virtual reality, where I'm going to stop very soon now, these things that I have been describing in these controls of the computer games and how the space is projected through the dynamic space creation in imaginative space, that already has become reality with virtual immersion, with head-mounted displays. But now a question comes. If the traditional film, which is not that old, takes into consideration camera angles, montage, sequence of time, all of these things, they cannot be used in the virtual reality, in the immersion. Instead of set, which is a projection through the camera lens, we actually look for totally scanned spaces. So the three-dimensional VR films really are not taken by camera, but they will be taken by complex scanners, several cameras, and then the picture is stitched together. So basically, filmmaking becomes architecture of its own right. Everything has to be designed. The spaces, the clothes, the artifacts, the furniture, anything the film, in a way, has to have, like the computer games, is becoming, to a certain extent, visually tangible from all the sides. And the montage doesn't work very well anymore. The first films that have come out through virtual reality allow you to stop the time, move into another space, let the time come moving again, and see it from totally different perspective. So what I'm driving here towards is that although some people think virtual reality is a kind of outdated thing, there are other new things coming up, then I must confess that I don't believe it.